Course from the transport centre to the CBD that many people take. You must remember that many disabled people don't have and never will have a driver's licence. So as a community of people, we rely on public transport and footpaths. So many of our community can't see, many are mobility challenged, and they're coming across Civic Plaza finding their way to the CBD. I've been missed closely myself by cars that are illegally parked in that area. Currently, the tactile guidance at the northern end drives people through the proposed area where cars will be parked. So the tactiles are provided for the blind community. So I think serious consideration needs to be taken of the safety risks for disabled people if cars are parked in this spot. In actual fact, CCS Disability Action would like to see no cars in the shared space and it just made a pedestrian area, as that would be safer for our people. When I was there yesterday, there were a significant number of people with learning impairments, people with crutches, walking frames, two people on adult tricycles, and they come very frequently to the CBD. I believe that our community needs to be a factor in the decision making here. Our life experience is different from the general public's, and our community of people matter. We want to be able to participate and contribute to society, and to do that, public spaces need to be designed in a way that everyone can safely use them, and we believe having parked cars in the area between Garden Place and the shared space is unsafe for our community of people.
Thank you, Jerry. I notice here, Jerry, you've also submitted on the Hamilton Traffic Bylaw. Is there anything you wish to add for the...
No, I guess it's just the same.
Garden.
It was around the parking area, the proposed parking area.
Just a question, Jerry. You said there that you would, or CCS would like to see no cars in the shared space. Does this mean no vehicles at all driving through as well, or just parking?
Well, I notice, although it is a reduced speed and it's shared space, some of the cars yesterday went through there quite quickly. And so and while we were standing there, a vehicle drove 6 inches past Stephen, unaware totally that he was blind. It was that close. Well, it was a very quiet vehicle, and I just thought that was appalling for anybody, let alone someone who has no sight. They were apologetic because I went and had a chat to them. But I mean, it is a main pedestrian road from the bus station, transport centre to the CBD, and you're going to have people using public transport who can't drive for various reasons, and they need to be safe on that route. And if you're a walking, seeing person with a driver's licence, you're probably not 100% aware of the range of impairments that are amongst the pedestrians. And yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions of Jerry? Councillor Gallagher.
So I've got this right. So you're talking about, the so-called shared space with vehicles, and in obviously Europe and other jurisdictions, if you go to say German cities and other cities, it's very common. The cobble streets, the cars, slow cars. And I don't know what research, if you're aware of any research, do you know what I mean? The sort of notion that cities are friendly and kind of, but drivers have adjusted their behaviour. I mean, I think my observation down here is people seem to think it's a full blast road, full blast.
Yeah, I think the thing is education and changing behaviours takes time, and our concern is that our community of people are safe while those adjustments are happening. Yeah. I think when you look back to the 50s when I was growing up, disabled people were often sequestered in Tokanui, Disabled people are community members now, and it takes time for society to adjust and recognise that some people have limitations or impairments that makes their ability to move out the way different to theirs. But not everyone is aware of that. And I think a car is quite a heavy weighted vehicle. I've been nearly hit numerous occasions when cars are backing, when I'm out with my grandchildren. I'm short, I'm the height of roughly a 6-year-old when I'm sitting. So I'm not seen, and I'm trying to keep young children safe as well. The library is going to be a destination hub. Thought needs to be given around the practicalities and how people behave, so that everyone's kept safe, because I don't think it's right that only the people, we all community members need to be considered in decision making.
And obviously, would certainly be asked for further discussion around that behaviour stuff and because you're probably aware that the kind of ideal and any sort of further information in terms of your own, obviously Europe, they appear to
I think, got it right. The other thing I want to ask you, it's an interesting thing, what we're talking about, you know, the mobility, you know, these mobility scooters, and with respect, I'm getting increasingly worried that unless we really focus on some driver training, we're going to have some tragedy, because these things are pretty heavy. You know, they zoom up footpaths, and the little child comes out of a driveway, you know, compared with, say, a cyclist. You know, these are very heavy numbers, and I'm just wondering if you have any observation around. So while I want vehicle, you know, driver education, emphasis signage, I think we need to do more work with the growing use of which are great, the growing use of mobility scooters in terms of speed and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, with part of our measuring accessibility, accessible journeys work, we counted pedestrians in Thames, and they've got about, significant, in a 4-hour period, I counted 45 mobility scooters at one intersection in Thames. So it was a high proportion of the pedestrian count. I do believe there should be more education for mobility scooter users, but it needs to be done in a comprehensive, integrated way so that everyone is captured. At the moment, anyone can buy a mobility scooter on the second-hand market and have no training. Usually the shops and commercial operations have a bit of a training session with purchases. But I think it's important to remember, though, how when developing training, that everyone should be considered, because I do believe that at the moment, and it's probably a bit out there, I feel perhaps not enough value is given to people who are members of the disability community, and we're often marginalised and not treated in an equitable way. But just simply because of the way society works, people with privilege, the world is designed to their way of living. And for disabled people, we're really diverse. We have really different requirements of systems, and I think that often isn't taken into account. I mean, a mobility scooter, I think it would be very important not to be too punitive with them, because that could be the mobility tool that is giving people independence. So it needs to be balanced.
And don't misperceive the comment. Trust me, I want to maximise people's ability to have that as an option, but it's around that comprehensive training, just like, dare I say it, cyclists.
Absolutely, and I believe currently, I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, but I believe that mobility scooters are allowed legislatively to use cycle lanes. Perhaps with this bigger investment in cycling by central government, there may be some opportunity to explore that as a solution if it really is going to be a problem, having them on pedestrian roads.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for your submission, Jerry. The next submitter is Sue Brown. Sue, would you like to just come forward, please?
Mr. Chair, do we have discussion time, or was it question time?
Just question time at this stage.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry. Is it something?
Sue.
Yes.
So you have
Well, I'll just go.
5 minutes for your presentation, and at 4 minutes we'll ring the bell. 5 minutes.
Well, good morning. I think I will be done before then.
Thank you.
My issue at this meeting is quite simple. I live in Garden Place apartments and have done for about 12 years. When I purchased my apartment here, it was a road and I had no problems. And during the changes to Garden Place, I'm sure there's quite a few councillors who are familiar with my name, because I was probably quite vocal and went to all the stakeholder meetings, and we had many discussions and were quite horrified at the changes that were made to Garden Place without any concern about the fact that it is a mixed commercial and residential area. We were promised during that whole time that the access to our properties would not be blocked, but they were, with bollards. We had further discussions, and I managed to get to change the bollards to bully boy bollards, which we can lower so that I can drive in via my phone, and that works quite well. It doesn't work well, though, when people park in front of it. And I've had quite a few discussions. I think the last discussion I had was with Phil Considine, who was very understanding. I have had numerous times. I mean, it's really very frustrating if I'm home and I want to leave and I can't because somebody's parked across the bollards. Parking people don't seem to be able to move them. Nobody comes and tows them away. And my concern is that despite our repeated requests to put better notices up regarding that this is a fire lane and an access, they're not suitable. They're too high. I mean, I have at times tried to point them out. Somebody's parked there and I've said, you can't park there. Why not? And they look around and the signs are too high. They don't see them when they're seated in their cars. They're not large enough. And my feeling is it needs something on the sidewalk, the footpath, that says no parking. We have concerns with fire engines and ambulance. In fact, just last week I saw an ambulance had to stop outside the bollards because they couldn't get in. The rubbish truck can't come and pick up our rubbish sometimes because people are parked across it. So we get charged an extra fee for having our rubbish picked up. There's many issues about it, and while I have I don't really have an issue with you turning it into a parking zone because I understand the rationale behind that. But my concern is that will that make it even harder for us with having the bollards blocked? And I would ask that you please take that under consideration and do something about having those bollards kept free, because while I actually park underground, I can't always park there and wheelchair across. Sometimes if I have groceries or for some specific reasons I have to drive up to the apartment. It is a huge frustration in life to be blocked to the point where I can't even access my own place. And there has to be ways around it. So, you know, that's my concern, a little selfish one, but, you know, I'm not the only person that lives in the garden place. There are quite a few apartments. There are 21 units in my building alone, and there is 3 that I know of opposite us, and then I think there's a few others in some of the other buildings. That's actually quite a lot of people, and although not all of them need to drive through, and not all of them do, there is enough. Even the service for the cafes and things like that, they have to come through with their goods. So I'll finish up there and just say thank you for listening.
Sue, in your submission, you've said that you agree with the proposals to the garden place down here, but one of the issues I think which you've highlighted is, shall we say, inconsistent enforcement within the shared zone. So really, would you like to see some parking or no parking?
No, I don't mind the parking,
You don't
as
mind
long
that.
as it's monitored to
Okay.
keep the bollards free. People park there anyway. I mean, and I understand your rationale is that you'll then have more jurisdiction over that space than you do at present. Is that correct? Right.
Okay.
And I don't have an issue with that, but as I said, it needs effective monitoring.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Councillor Forsyth?
Is the time up or not? The bell's gone.
No, you're right.
Look, I'm just a little bit confused about how the bollards work. Could you just explain that again? Do you have some device or some access to bring them up
Yes.
and down? Is that correct?
Yes, I have a code on my mobile phone, and I approach the bollards, and I hit my code. The bollards will go down, and once I've gone over them, they come back up again, and the same in reverse.
Okay, so obviously the rubbish trucks don't have this code, otherwise they
Yes,
would be able to...
They do, but sometimes when they get there, the people are parked across it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
righto. And same with fire trucks.
Well, yes. Yeah.
Great, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just,
Councillor Young?
yeah, it's not a question. I just share your concern as well, because I did organize some cultural event in the garden place. I remember one time when we finished the event, nobody could leave the place
That's
because
right.
there's a car right there.
That's right. I have
really understand that.
several times I've noticed people struggling to get out, including the police one night, and I have gone down and used my code to let them out. because if they're parked over one, you can squash out the other way. But,
So, I mean, from you, what do you think the best way to address this problem? Signage or marking on the ground, or
I feel marking on the ground is better. It needs to be extremely evident. And as I said, the signs don't seem to be adequate. They're small, they're too high for someone sitting in their vehicle. Obviously, you can't put anything on the boilie boys because they won't go down. They're a very smooth fit.
Yep.
So, to me, a painted entrance or even curbing it, just because when I bought my place, which was about 2002, it was a road, and as I understand it, still is a road, and yet it's blocked. So it should have an entrance showing that it is an access way. I mean, I have other areas of the town, you'll see something saying fire lane. You know, why can't they write fire lane on the ground? Well, you know, there needs to be something to indicate that you cannot park there.
understand? Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much for your submission, Sue. Our next submitter is Andrew Bramwell. Would you like to come forward, please, Andrew? Like the last submitter, Andrew, you had 5 minutes, so battling at 4.
Thank you. Well, you know my name, and my key interest is that I'm a walker. That's my mode of choice to get around the city, and I can get from one point of the city to any other point in the city within 2 hours walking. And I love Hamilton because of that, because it's so compact. And in the CBD, I spend half a day to a full day in the CBD on average a week. Would be a half a day on average. And I cross over the space that we're talking about today. I probably spend about 15 minutes of that crossing over there. About half that time I have my young children with me in a pram, and I have a double pram. It's great. I can fit lots of groceries on there too. So I walk to get my groceries as well. Walking through the space when people have been parked there illegally, seeing cars coming is difficult, even though I'm standing. And what I've found is that the cars are getting taller that people are choosing to buy. They're buying more and more of those SUV type vehicles, or even, I noticed in the newspaper, the new BMW electric car is quite tall because the battery's in the floor pan. So people are sitting more upright. And they're trying to fit, manufacturers are trying to fit more, room into the car and inside the car. So having people sitting upright is quite a good way of doing that. So seeing past these people is difficult. And another submitter talked a little bit about driver behaviour, and there is an expectation in my household that every time we go out there'll be an incident where someone pulls out of a driveway without looking, where someone goes through a red light without any consideration. And what I'm seeing more and more is that the drivers are seeing less and less because they're looking down at their phones, or they're distracted by something else. And they're blatantly doing so. So despite there being a law change and making an offence to do that, it doesn't seem to have changed behaviour. So when I look at the behaviour around the share zone, and I didn't like the share zone going in, but I do like the way it looks, and I do like using the space. So I found myself swung around, and I can see how it's brought some vitality to this area, whereas before it was just pedestrians, and having the vehicles in the mixed use has brought some benefits, and losing the big underground car park entrance is quite a nice thing. Although I do like brutalism architecture, I find it quite appealing. So having the ability to change the use of it for parking and not for parking, I can see there's some benefits in that, but I don't want any parking there at all because I think it blocks it. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions of Andrew? Councillor David.
Thank you. I'm interested in your observations and comments about the kind of the look and feel of the space and the fact that there's been law changes that say you can't do something, but people still continue to do it. What are your comments about the look and feel of the space when cars weren't parked there and now they more obviously are? And I'm just sort of trying to get your understanding or your perception, I suppose, of what the cars parked there do for the car users. Does that make sense?
Yes, so you're asking me to take a subjective view of what the car users are getting out of that space. Is that what you're saying?
By having cars parked there, yeah.
I think that for a car user driving through there, it does block their vision too. So
Okay.
for some people, it would create a tunnelling. And I can understand why some of the guys or women with hotted up cars would get a bit of a thrill from speeding through there, because when you're driving through a tunnel, the perception of speed isn't as heightened. So that'd be quite cool, really.
Yeah.
But it's not cool for people walking through. Another factor that has changed the use of the space is the loss of the wall and putting the steps on the edge of the raised lawn. That's opened the space up quite considerably. If that had just been done and not the shared space, it would have made a major difference alone. But having the shared space as well and having the vehicles coming through, it breaks the space, and that can be good.
Do you think the parked cars there sort of changes the user hierarchy?
Yes, it does. It puts it more in a convenience mindset where in the middle of the city, it is kind of like a refuge where it's a nice space to walk. You can sit. There's people gathering there, young people enjoying each other's company, people going to the library, sitting outside reading books. It's a really nice space to walk through now. And having cars there parked changes it to more of a convenience drop-off zone. What are we, a big box recreation area?
Yeah.
That's the thing. You go to big box retail all out in the industrial areas, and it's just to see your car parks. I think there's a place for car parks. I don't think that is it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Andrew? Thanks very much for your submission, Andrew. Our next submitter is Chris Orr. Chris, would you like to come forward, please? You all set there? That's the one. Yep, you've got it. And Chris is submitting on behalf of the Blind Foundation. Chris, you have a total of 15 minutes, if you wish to, and the bell will ring at 14 minutes.
Thank you. I got the microphone right?
You're doing well.
Right?
Yep.
Thank you. It's quite hard when you can't see it.
Sure.
So good morning and thank you for your time. I'd just like to add to our submission, because obviously you read it and considered it, but the previous submitters have made some very valuable points that I'd like to also reiterate and support what they're saying. And I'd also, if I have an opportunity as part of my time, to have some discussion with councillors that have already raised it about the shared space concept. We have some strong views and some really good, hopefully some good information we can add into those discussions. Firstly, though, looking at what we're here for today is considering the zoning. The car parks where they are now, and already the previous submitter made some fantastic points here and articulated it really well. It changes, and one of the councillors, I'm not sure of her name, it changes the hierarchy of how that space is used. Now, a colleague of mine, Karina Duke, was here and submitted on the 29th of October. She was down here, and there were a number of cars already parked there and parked illegally. So two of the things there's a non-compliance by the person parking the car, but there's also a point of duty here for the enforcement officers of this precinct to be able to, they should be taking more notice and making sure that they're not there. That's the first part of it. Either they're allowed there or they're not. Our perspective and our position is that from a safety perspective, a safe and independence perspective is what we would prefer. No cars parked there inside those spaces. It impinges on the ability of people who are blind or have low vision to be able to safely and independently walk in their city to go about their daily business. Jerry in her submission referred to the fact that the environment is already heavily weighted in favour of people who are 6 feet tall, upright walking bipeds who can hear and see really well. What we're encouraging you to do is to change the weighting in that so that everyone can use that environment safely and independently and go about their business. We, as an organisation, the Blind Foundation, would propose to have a minimum of 1.8 and better to have a 2 metre clear, accessible path of travel that has nothing in it that impinges on the ability of a blind pedestrian to be able to walk safely, independently, and with the knowledge that there's going to be nothing in that space to get in their road. The previous speaker immediately before me commented on the fact that when you change the area in terms of taking it away from pedestrian only to traffic only and took away the grass and so on, it changed the look and feel of the environment. That's the same for us as blind people as well. But what it did then do was add another thing for us to be aware of. That's having cars moving around and cars parking there. If they're not meant to be there, they shouldn't be there. And that is totally our position. And we really value the opportunity as an organisation to feed into this process, to have our voice heard. 25%, as Jerry pointed out before, are people with an impairment. And the instant you change the zoning, you're then impinging on their lifestyles so that they can't go about doing what they want to do. And that's our perspective, is safety and usability. Safety first. Change the thinking from the car being the first element of thought to the pedestrian being the first element of thought. And I'd also like to support what Jerry said before, the research that was undertaken that cars parking in an area, there is no evidence that they actually add to the economic well-being of the local retail owners there, whether they be hospitality or whatever they're in. There's no real evidence there, so there's no real need to have the cars parking there. You've got a perfectly adequate car park underneath here. Why do you have to have it out on the street? That's our perspective. Now, so that's my thinking on that. Can I now comment on the shared space thing? Is that okay with you, Mr. Chair? I think it was Councillor Gallagher that talked about the shared spaces. I've had a good deal of experience in the New Zealand setting with designing a shared space that works for all in a similar way to the European experience. The difference between the European experience and, say, transferring it down here to the Southern Hemisphere is they have hundreds of years, centuries of people walking and using those spaces. Our environments were designed for wheeled vehicles to take place. So the thinking has been, for people using those, is wheeled vehicles have precedence, people who walk don't. When the shared spaces concepts were brought into Great Britain, there was a huge amount of acrimony between the designers of the shared space concepts and the people that were using them. In particular, people who were blind or have no vision were affected, because moving around those environments, there was no way in which you could easily navigate around the environment knowing that the area you were going to be walking in, you weren't going to be run over. There were some shared spaces that were introduced in Great Britain that were 4 lanes wide. And if you expect people who are using, it looks like a highway, it is a highway. So they're not going to go to the speed that they're supposed to go at, they're going to go for it. bearing all that in mind, when the shared space concept was first thought about and was in Auckland City, and the old Auckland City Council did a great thing. They wanted to introduce it, but they entered into a dialogue with the disabled community. How can we make this shared space work for all of us, where the car doesn't have precedence? There is no precedence. Everyone has a fair share of the space. It took nearly 3 years, but we've achieved it. With a really good design, and it is a good design, it looks like a shared space, it feels like a shared space, it is a shared space, but it works for us as well. It works for us as well. When you introduce the concept down here, my understanding is, and I wasn't involved in it, but there was some consultation. However, when it opened, and I had the opportunity to come down here, I could not believe that the design that you guys adopted and put in, it doesn't work for us as a blind community. It could have and should have worked really well, but some basic design principles weren't used. We can help with that. How it works is basically this. There is a 1.8, and every space is different. Streets are easy to do, squares are not, but it can be achieved with good dialogue and adoption of good sound principles. With streets, the basic principle is this. There's a 1.8 as a minimum, and depending on the width of the street, 2 metre wide, clear, accessible path of travel. Nothing is in there. No sandwich boards, no outdoor dining furniture, no plant boxes, no trees, no nothing. They are outside of that clear, accessible path of travel. And to achieve that, how are we going to achieve this in terms of blind people? Because when blind people are walking down a street, get a building on one side and you have a curb on the other. So using the curb as your outside edge. So we had to achieve a curb without having a curb that wouldn't look like the tactile ground surface indicators, those bright yellow ones. Not that, but we wanted to have something that achieved the same sort of thing. We did that by having a different treatment on the surface of the road. Looks great, feels great from our perspective. A person with a cane walking along can pick it up really easily and know that they're just keeping left or keeping right. Outside of that is where you put your planting furniture, your trees and your outdoor furniture and everything else that needs to go in there. Then the cars can move up and down. So you're keeping them so you can do it. We can work with you to make it work for your environment as well as it does for others. And in our submission, we referred to New Zealand Transport Agency draft that is currently, we've been hoping for some months that it would be out. And in that is what New Zealand Transport Agency would encourage cities, district councils, whatever, to adopt so that you get good sound design principles built in. It was developed alongside the Blind Foundation and the cities who had introduced really good shared space designs into their practices. So it can work, we can help you with it. And as I say, changing the behaviour of our drivers from being king, queen, duke, duchess and all of that for however long our streets have been there. Because as I said, our streets and roads were designed for wheeled vehicles. It's not like that in Europe, in Germany, in Holland, in Austria. And those of you that had and as I have, there are places there that cars can't go. And I tell you what, it's great fun walking down there. Then you've got to be careful of the quiet, fast wheeled vehicles. Bikes. Bikes are great, but you know, they actually can be quite unsafe. So I'll end it there. Are you all still there? You've all gone very quiet.
Yeah, no.
Oh, good. I thought you may have slipped out while I was carrying on there. So if you have any questions, I'm going to be too pleased to try and answer.
Thanks very much, Chris. Does anybody have any questions of Councillor Gallagher?
Well, I'll try and have the keep it to questions, although I think the discussion is actually very useful. A good example why this council should have some operational committees so we can do this all the time in terms of our interaction, and I agree we've lost a transport focused committee where we could have this stuff. Can you give me, thank you very much, and I hear what you say about Europe, and I think, albeit I wasn't a fan of the proposal down there, and I opposed it at the time. However, the potential over time is to take us to more of that European behaviour.
Yep.
In New Zealand, with the work that you have done, and along with Jerry and others, are there any sort of ideal kind of models in New Zealand that we can actually, have a good look at? I mean, you've given me some metric, measurements, but I'm just trying to think of the picture being worth 1,000 words.
Yep, not a problem. All you have to do is go to Auckland, look at Elliott, Derby, and streets down there, and that's being extended to O'Connell Street, Federal Street. You don't sound like a gambler, councillor.
No.
Just outside Sky City there in Federal Street, they're just turning that area into a shared space.
Right.
And that's been designed with the input of the Blind Foundation into the project.
Right.
The key here is that there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
You can have some basic principles, but it depends on the width of the street and the footpath that's there. But yes, there are some examples, and the Blind Foundation would be more than happy to come down to present alongside with photographs, the whole 12 yards, death by PowerPoint, if you want that. And we can give you all sorts of illustrations of how it can work and does work. We've got concrete examples of how it works.
And I'm going to stress, obviously, I'm, unlike yourself and Chris Allen and the team here, I'm a lay person, right?
Yep.
So we have an ideal,
Yep.
but it's how we get from A to B, frankly.
It is that, and the thing is to take up the opportunity. Now, as I said, New Zealand Transport Agency are coming out with a whole, it's in traffic engineer speak, it's in I talk in layperson's language. I try to do that so that people like you and me, who aren't traffic engineers, can understand the basic concepts. I'm just lucky that I've been involved and immersed in making New Zealand accessible for blind people for the past 20 years. And over time has picked up a lot of knowledge and background of how we can do that. And this is a great example. We were so thrilled when Auckland City came and said, let's make this work, and it has. Where we are disappointed is when other councils grab the shared space concept and just do it because it looks nice. We can make it look nice and be accessible.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
There's no other questions. Thanks very much for your submission there, Chris. And
Thank you very much for your
I think
time.
we are sort of a little bit focused on the motor vehicle in New Zealand, aren't we?
Oh yes, indeed. Any vehicle with a wheel, whether it be a car or whatever, they seem to take precedence. But
One of the problems is, of course, is Kiwis have a love affair with the motor car. That's the problem.
they do indeed. Yes.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Our next submitter is Stephen Bennett. Is Stephen here? Yep. Oh, there we are, Stephen. Here. You're just about there. That's it. Good man. So you've got your chair? Perhaps, hang on, somebody will come down and assist you there, Stephen.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you are. You've got it. And just in front of you, there's the table and there's a couple of mics just right in front of you there. So, Stephen, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and I see it's on the Garden Place pedestrian mall. And at 4 minutes, we will ring the bell.
Sure
And
thing.
then we'll have questions after that, if there's any.
Well, okay, yes, I can hear I'm coming through the mic
Yep.
now. Very aware of mics in case there's anyone with a hearing impairment that's relying on them. Very important. So, I'm a self-employed music teacher and musician. I've lived in, my family's lived in Hamilton since about 1962, but I've really only moved back here in the last year or so, having lived in other places. One of them starts with A, and I won't even mention it. Yeah, that's it.
Is that Alexandra, was it?
Yeah, something like that. I just want to talk about the idea of putting parking into that area between Garden Place and the shared space. I among other things that I've done in my life, I was, I think, the first blind or low vision person in the Southern Hemisphere to be employed by the Foundation of the Blind as a mobility instructor, which means I taught other blind people how to get around, hopefully how to get around better than I do. But so I think what I'm humbly saying is I'm good at this stuff in terms of a blind person travelling around with a white cane. But that shared space taxes my limited skills to the limit. And if cars went in there, if you had to deal with the idea of cars backing out, I've been bumped, I think, 3 times in my life by cars backing. And I have got, just in case anyone didn't see it, I have got a 60-inch long white cane that sticks up that high, up to about my head height, and with the best will in the world, people when they're backing just don't seem to notice it. It's quite big, but and it's, you know, I mean, like the nicest people. It's not about how careful you are. It's just when drivers are backing, they're looking mostly for other vehicles that they don't want to back into, for bollards that they don't want to back into. They're looking, hopefully, for small children that they don't want to back into. But we've heard from other submitters that if, for some reason, you're travelling around and you're not very high off the ground, you can fail to be seen. And it seems that if you're travelling around with a white cane, you can also fail to be noticed. Now, for myself, it'll take a lot of bumps and bruises before I give up travelling in an area that I want to travel in. The shared space, as it is currently, is really, really difficult. It's really, really difficult for people with low vision. And I'm talking also, we need to consider the group of people who, in their older age, develop age-related macular degeneration. They haven't had my 50 years of experience as a non-visual traveller, yet they are forced to pretty much function. They just don't see a lot of detail. And these are, you know, this is sort of the age of my mother, my dad, you know, we're all getting to that stage where our relatives are getting older. Macular degeneration means that people can't see the detail. They can see a few things like cars, but they can't see a lot of detail. And this business of cars backing out from any number of directions is just going to make a very, very difficult journey much more difficult. And I can see how it can, I mean, people who want to be independent are going to be put off. They just aren't going to do it. And I can say that from my own point of view and also from the point of view of the people I used to train. Thanks. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Earlier on in her submission, Jerry mentioned the fact that vehicles travelling through the shared zone are very difficult for an impaired person. Have you had this experience in that area?
Yes, but it's more difficult when people are backing because there's just this vague noise. You don't know whether they're backing in or out.
Okay.
You don't know. And I looked up yesterday, the Ministry of Transport figures reckon there are some 8,800 hybrids. They're designed to actually travel silently under 10 Ks. Or 10 Ks still hurts. Even though, I mean, it's great that they travel silently, but this is going to become more of a problem when people are backing in and out. And even the cars that are not hybrids, we all agree that they're getting quieter, which is great in a way. But when they're travelling at 5 or 10 Ks backing in or out, it's just going to be a nightmare.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of Stephen? Thanks very much for your submission, Stephen. I'd just like to thank all the submitters who have gone to quite a considerable effort to actually submit on this proposal. And I think the contents of all the submissions has been very well thought out. And it probably has opened my eyes, excuse the pun, as to some of the issues, of course, which our physically disabled and our sight impaired persons have within our community. So I'd just like to say thanks very much for your efforts this morning. At this stage, I think staff will go away and prepare a report and then bring that back for the S&P committee, I think it is it? 24th February. 24th February. Okay. Councillor Gallagher.
And obviously you want some guidance from from this committee, and I'm aware that we have in our own staff team a person or persons of huge expertise and significant national background. I'd expect her to be consulted as well. I'm sure you will do that. And I'd really like to actually, I guess, my own view is to get the flexibility, to get the balance between a situation where council can respond, and I hear, and just correct me if I'm wrong, Chris or Mr. Chair, I hear that the current situation is that we're sort of, if you like, boxed in, right? So you want a sort of a kind of a flexibility in terms of to respond to changing needs and circumstances. So the sort of the by resolution. So you have the input from Jerry and the Blind Foundation and all those people out there who've got significant expertise working with our experts on the staff. So we don't have to go through heaps and heaps of hearings, but we can actually move flexibly. So that's number one. Number two, working, and I'd be interested in the comparison between our shared space as a layperson and another, the Auckland examples. Are there some refinements? I know this is about a bylaw and about the bylaw, but in the end it's about, this is all but a tool to get some good outcomes, okay? Is that a fair? So those are the kind of things I'd like to see in the report.
Can I respond? The way it works is that before the design is decided, you have the conversation, you reach a resolution and agreement. That's the best way of doing it. So it's a partnership. That's the way it works, and the flexibility is built into that process at the beginning. And once a lot of that stuff's in, Hamilton City's got a code of practice. You build it into there, so that it becomes part of something you do, as opposed to something over here that's nice to do. Does that make sense? So your flexibility is built into the design process.
Okay.
But I like the word flexibility, because as I said in my presentation, one size does not fit all.
Mr. Chair, what's the process for us from now on? Are we meeting now to form a recommendation, or what happens?
I think we probably could get some feedback from them.
We're going to deliberate?
I'll just look to Aaron for some advice there, Aaron. in terms of process.
Yeah, through the chair. So the report will be prepared by staff, which will go to the February SMP committee, and it's at that meeting where council will deliberate. So this subcommittee here will need to prepare a report on today's hearings that go to the committee in February.
So we're going to meet now?
So what you're saying, really, Margaret, is that from our input, from what we've heard today,
yes,
I'd like to actually get that input from the members now, if that's okay with you people. It'll only, I think you have to leave 11 o'clock meeting, haven't you?
yes, I do.
And I think
But are you going to
it'll
close the
very
meeting now?
And that way the staff can actually take those. You're quite happy with that, Aaron? Yeah, good as gold. So let's do that.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, just in terms of process.
Is the meeting still open or closed?
Still open.
Well, so point of order, you go into closed session, you can't close a meeting, we're not meeting informally, we're either in a meeting and we move closed session, because this is a process, I respect that, but I just, as a point of procedure, the meeting opens, but you might want to actually go into closed session, I don't know.
I think what we need to do is to close this meeting and then open up another full discussion group.
All right.
Would that be fair, Clive? Yep.
Thank you.
So the meeting now of the Traffic Bylaw Hearing Subcommittee is now closed, and I'd just like to thank all those persons who have attended this morning.
Thank you.